from our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus. Today, mass turnpike tolls and other transportation changes. Here's Laura Hutchinson.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. In just a few months, drivers here in Massachusetts will be paying even more to use the Massachusetts Turnpike. After 17 years of not having to pay tolls from West Stockbridge to Springfield, the tolls are coming back in October, and that's where 22 News in Focus comes in. This week, we'll talk to state leaders about why the tolls are coming back and what the money will be used for. We'll also talk about other transportation projects like rebuilding the I-91 viaduct and accelerated bridge construction projects. Later on, we'll also talk to two state lawmakers about other policies they're working on. But first, here to kick off our conversation today, we have Frank DePola, Administrator of the Highway Division at MassDOT. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it. Nice to have you here. Now, this transportation bill that includes the tolls going up and a few other taxes. Well, this was not an easy pass. This was very controversial, talked about for a very long time. Talk to me about what some of the sticking points were. What did you think was important to be included in that package?
Well, when we developed the initial bill or the initial plan, in of course cooperation with Governor Patrick's administration, the DOT did a survey of the state. We conducted 17 public hearings. Had thousands of people attend these hearings. We had one in Springfield, one in Pittsfield in this area of the state. But we also covered all areas of Massachusetts. And we compiled essentially a wish list from the citizens of where they wanted to see further investment in their transportation network. And that's both transit, highways, RMV, and any other transportation-related expenditures. This all went into a proposed filing that went to the legislature about transportation needs and the funding to accomplish this. The legislature took that information, inboarded as part of a subcommittee that was formed between the House and Senate. They got together and they have now turned out the transportation revenue bill that you see today. And the idea was to fund, at least in part, the needed investment to upgrade the infrastructure around the state.
Okay, so what does this mean for drivers now? Are they going to have to get special new transponders? How does this work? Because there are more projects considered down the road. So what does this mean for the immediate change in October?
Okay, as far as between exits 1 and 6 on I-90, just a little background. The money that's collected on the Western Turnpike is used for the maintenance and repair of the Western Turnpike. We currently have about $18 million a year of net income that we can use for maintenance and repair, and that's from West Stockbridge all the way to Route 95 in the town of Weston. So that's 127 miles of road, 14 interchanges and numerous bridges and culverts and other structures. So we've actually been falling behind a little bit on needed maintenance and repair and replacement due to the age of the roadway. The restoration of those tolls through exits 1 through 6 will actually increase our net revenue by about $12 million per fiscal year. So that will give us that additional $12 million to invest into the roadway. We have a lot of needs between exits 1 and 6, so most of that money that we collect will be reinvested into the road that the people use.
Do you have any concerns, let me just stop you there, about how this may impact, what was taken into consideration, as taxes are going up and other expenditures are going up? Did you feel this was the appropriate time to bring these tolls back, or did you feel the projects that are necessary far outweighed that?
Yes, we felt it was the appropriate time because the status and level of repair of our roadways is directly linked to the economic health of the region. So if the road becomes in a state of disrepair and there's congestion or just lack of ability for people to move around efficiently and easily, it does have a direct effect on the local economy. So we felt it was best to find a way statewide, but specifically along the turnpike between exit 1 and 6, is to sort of create that user fee type relationship so that people know, yes, it's costing me some money to either drive on this roadway or to go to the RMV or whatever the case may be, but I know that that money gets reinvested so that I will always have access to this road or this other transportation asset.
Okay, and this is not the only project. I know that there are other ideas down the road to have some of these high-speed tolls as well. Talk to me about where we are going to be now and where you hope to be.
Yes, what we're trying to do is make the driving experience better for the user. So right now, one of the constant complaints about I-90 in particular is the congestion to get on the road and get off the road, especially on those high travel days, you know, before long weekends or holiday travel periods. So we're going forward to a high-speed tolling option called all electronic tolling. And this way we'll remove the actual toll booths from the roadway, and there'll be no more cash exchange on the roadway itself. People driving down the road will pass under a toll bridge at the posted speed limit. We'll either capture the signal from your EasyPass transponder and it'll be charged to your account like it is today, or we will get a photographic image of your license plate, and through that tag number we can look up the name and address of the registered owner, and we'll send them a bill for the use of the toll road on a monthly basis.
Okay, and is that what these are? Is this the
Yes.
new one here? So what are these two? Put
The
these up so people
the
can see
larger
them.
one is the initial or the original transponder that was distributed by the Mass Turnpike Authority as part of their conversion to the EasyPass system. The smaller one is a new model that we now issue. MassDOT is part of a 14-state consortium, so we did a bulk purchase. All 14 states got together and made one purchase, and the newest vendor called Capsh, the smaller transponder, is their model, and they have a 10-year contract for the 14 states to supply those. Our transponders are compatible with use of toll roads in all those other states, and that extends from the state of Maine down to North Carolina and includes Pennsylvania and New York State as well.
Okay, so as some of these changes are being made, do people need to update their transponders now? How does this work?
There are a series of transponders that were issued in the Western Mass, Berkshire County area that are actually no-fee transponders. Those will be turned off when we switch to, when we actually put the tolls back on.
Sure.
And that's October 15th. So we're asking people to turn those in, and we will exchange those at no fee for one of the newer, smaller transponder models.
Okay, and then this is something, so going forward, eventually we will all be. And
Yes.
as you said before, these are, you're able to use these in other states as well.
Yes, they're compatible with the EasyPass system, which I said extends from Maine to North Carolina. So most of the states that people drive through, they'll be compatible. Massachusetts will still handle their bills. They'll be getting their bill from Massachusetts, but it'll list any out-of-state usage.
Okay, I understand that you've been holding meetings on this throughout the entire state, here in Springfield this week. What are some things that you're getting out of these meetings? I think you were out in Boston earlier.
Correct.
What are these meetings for? What are you getting out of them?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I want to clarify. We're having two series of meetings. The meetings we're having in August are actually public meetings to give information about the electronic tolling conversion. It's not really to talk about the restoration of tolls, because that's a public hearing, versus an informational meeting that we're holding tonight in Worcester and Thursday night in Springfield. In September, we're going to have two public hearings, one here in Springfield and one out in the town of Lee, on either end of the section where we're restoring the tolls. And that's to invite public comment on the restoration of the tolls on those interchanges.
So what are you hearing from people already? Is this something that, is there pushback to this? Is this something that people are pretty accepting of? What are you finding?
In relation to electronic tolling, most people are very supportive. A lot of them are saying comments like about time, or they've been looking for something similar to what New Hampshire has, which is called open road tolling, where people with transponders can drive by it at the posted speed limit. In our setup, even people without transponders will be able to drive at high speeds through the toll plazas. So they're very positive about that. They do ask some specific questions, as you brought up, is if I don't have a transponder, how will I be tolled? And that's the purpose of those meetings, is to explain to people how it will function and what it will look like. It's going to be a very streamlined looking system, very similar to what you see the highway signs now over the road. So it won't be obtrusive, and it won't really affect the environment. And actually, we're going to shrink our footprint, so to speak, and reduce the amount of space that we have covered with asphalt.
Now, how do you think this is going to go in October? Do you see this being a smooth transition over to reinstating the tolls?
Well, I think the transition or the reinstatement of the tolls will be smooth. I'm sure there are some people who are opposed to the idea of paying for something that, as you said, they've paid no fee for 17 years. Mm-hmm. However, I just appeal to the public that that money that they spend on those tolls will be reinvested into the road they drive on, and is not going back to Boston to pay for bills for either transit or the Big Dig. All this money will remain in Western Massachusetts and be invested in that roadway.
Are there any projects in particular that you think needs work on the Mass Pike in the western part of the state? I mean, over the 17 years, is there some built-up group of projects that now it's time to address and we need to pay for it, or how does this work? Do you have a few on your list that you'd like to do?
Yeah, definitely. There's the bridge on I-90 over the Deerfield River that was built when the original pike was built, and it's coming in time for replacement. We have a lot of highway lighting along there. If you know, out by Blandford, if you've been out there, we have some temporary lights up on wooden poles because of problems we have with the permanent lighting. That needs to be upgraded. We have been doing work on the rock ledge on the side of the highway in the Blandford area because we've had issues with loose rock falling down onto the roadway. We're cutting some of that back, but we could cut more of that back and move that rock away from the edge of the road. There's a lot of drainage work on the road that needs to be upgraded, and we've had collapsed culverts and culverts that are blocked with debris. Mm-hmm. We need to upgrade that drainage to make sure that it drains properly for safe riding surface.
So you have no plans?
No, we have a few things. We have a few things to spend money on.
So you have a few things you can spend your money on. All right, very, very good. Frank Topola, we're going to stick around and we're going to continue this conversation and also talk about a few other transportation projects that we have happening here in Western Mass. So stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're continuing our conversation now with Frank Topola, the administrator at Mass DOT Highway Division. Thanks so much again for joining us.
Of course,
I just want to finish the conversation we started about the tolls. Of course, we're reinstating the tolls in October and some other changes with the Mass Pike coming. How about the workers, the people who work, the toll collectors that you have now? How will this impact them for the October date and then, I don't know, possibly later on down the road as we're talking about these others?
Well, for October 15th, we actually have always had the toll booths in place on exits 1 through 6. We've never stopped collecting tolls for commercial vehicles. So we have staff in place and we also have the infrastructure in place. And it's a matter of the paper ticket being reprinted with the new toll schedule and updating our Easy Pass toll schedules to reflect, collections at those first 6 exits. So there'll be no staffing changes, no increases or decreases as a result of that change. However, going forward, as we transition to electronic tolling, we will no longer need to have a toll collector workforce at the interchanges or at the toll booths. Many of them can be retrained to be working in the back office that supports the video toll transactions. There are also other jobs within DOT that we hope to retrain and repurpose those toll collectors into, because we have other needs, administrative as well as technical and other maintenance needs in DOT throughout the state. And eventually we hope that the remaining toll collector workforce will either be separated via some kind of early retirement incentive or some other separation incentives so that they can move on into other areas.
Okay, so you have about 420 toll collectors, you said.
That's correct.
So we're looking at maybe 300 or so that may have to
be reduced.
Reduced. Okay. Moving on to some other projects as well. Of course, the 91 viaduct, the raised highway in downtown Springfield, is something that we've been talking about here locally, at least, that it needs repair. How serious do you understand that project to be right now?
Well, we're trying to stay ahead of it becoming a structural deficiency. Mm-hmm. It is not structurally deficient, even though there are a lot of sections of the deck in particular that needs constant maintenance repair. We invest approximately $2 million a year already doing repair work on the viaduct, and essentially once we replace the viaduct, that's lost money. So we don't want to do that longer than we absolutely have to. We are looking at the viaduct. We're doing some preliminary design now, or preliminary engineering planning on how we would replace it. It's a relatively straightforward process, even though it's a very large structure. So from a cost perspective, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, but the technology is there, and a bridge that we're doing locally is a good example of that technology. We do have the technology that we could replace the viaduct piece by piece with minimal disturbance to the Springfield area.
This sounds like a nightmare. Road work on 91, even replacing this. How would something like this work? I mean, typically, where would you put all those cars while you're replacing this?
Well, a good example is we replaced 14 bridges on Route I-93 north of Boston 2 summers ago. And what we did is on weekends, we were able to take the one side of the highway and change it to 2 lanes each direction because of the lower weekend volumes. And then over a weekend, we tear out the old section of bridge. We bring in prefabricated bridge sections. We assemble them in place like Legos, tie them together, and by Monday morning, we reopen the road to full traffic. We did that 10 weekends in a row over the summer of 10, 11. And that was a good trial. That traffic volume is actually higher than what I-91 sees on a typical weekday and weekend. So we know that that method will work here, and we can employ that same method and go basically section by section or span by span up and down the viaduct and replace it that way.
Okay, when you compare this to other viaducts in the state, so to speak, how do we rank? Because we've heard that this is detrimental, this needs to be done soon, and it makes you scared to almost drive your car on it. But then you hear from others, it's not as bad as what you're hearing, it's okay if this goes a while. When you compare this to like projects in the state, how do you sort of view the status of this one right now? Is it up there at the top of the list, or?
Yeah, it's a high priority. One, because it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, elevated bridge in the entire state. I mean, the Tobin Bridge and some of these larger bridges in the state are longer, but as far as an extended length of time of elevated roadway, the viaduct is right near the top of some of the largest bridges. It's approaching structurally deficient. We're trying to stay on top of it so we don't have to post weight limits, that sort of thing. And it's such a large structure that once it becomes structurally deficient, then we have a big problem. So we're trying to get ahead of it before we have an emergency situation. No one's in any danger driving on it. My crews are out there on a regular basis looking at the structure, staying on top of it, spending a lot of maintenance hours and time and money, keeping it right on that cusp of being, it's okay, but it's close to being structurally deficient. So what we want to do is we want to have a comprehensive plan to address it, because because it's such a large structure, it will take a while to replace and rehabilitate this structure. So the sooner we can get going on that, the sooner we can get that accomplished, and then it'll be fine for 75 years or more.
And is there money there? Is this something that we'll see get started in the next year or so, 2 years? What are you thinking your timeline looks like?
I'm thinking potentially in 2 years. Fortunately, the revenue bill that was recently passed has provided some additional funding which will allow us to move forward on the initial planning of this. One of the things we're keeping our eye on is the development in the gaming side of things, because whether we just replace the viaduct in kind or change it somewhat depends a little bit upon where these gaming facilities finally locate.
Okay, so that is something that you're looking at. So should MGM or Hard Rock be chosen down in this end, that viaduct may move up, it sounds like, at least,
Well,
right?
there may definitely need to be some changes because the desire point along the viaduct may change based upon where a potential gaming facility is located. So not only would we want to rehabilitate the viaduct, but we would also want to incorporate any changes necessary to mitigate traffic impacts from that kind of facility.
Okay, so the thinking is that while these don't go hand in hand, they almost kind of do in the mindset a little bit. As we look at these proposals, we may do that at the same time as we need to create other
Right, as we're planning a structure that's supposed to last for 75 years, we really have to look down the road at what potentially can happen and take that into consideration as we do the final engineering and design. We would not want to build something that becomes functionally obsolete because it needed a new interchange literally within a few years of completion. So we do want to understand what happens with these gaming facilities, but the majority of the work we can proceed with the planning and design of, because it's really just an adjustment of what we're doing once we know where they land.
Okay, very good. That's fair enough. And how about this accelerated bridge project? I know you were in Western Massachusetts on Tuesday for that. Talk to us about what that is.
Well, the bridge over the Manhattan River in East Hampton is one of our accelerated bridge projects. The state back in '08, the legislature approved a bill which called for an investment in the state of our bridges in Massachusetts. We're in year 5 of an 8-year program to invest $3 billion across the state in bridge upgrades and replacements. Manhattan River Bridge is a $4 million bridge. And part of the uniqueness of that project is it was done in prefabricated sections. So we've closed the bridge for a 6-month period. We tore the old bridge out. We've put in a whole new foundation. While the contractor was building the foundation elements in a plant in Vermont, the actual bridge was being prefabricated. Just about a month ago, the prefabricated sections were brought down by truck, and over a weekend, all of them were set on the now new bridge piers, and the bridge is now being knitted together, so to speak, so that we can complete it. We're targeting opening it up in October, and maybe might even be able to open it up earlier than that.
And are these structurally deficient bridges that you're talking about?
Yeah, the bridge that we removed was structurally deficient, so we just removed the entire thing right down to the bedrock foundation. We put in a whole new foundation, and rehabilitated the piers and tied it into some historic granite work on the abutment side. But in general, the bones or the skeleton of the bridge is all new, and the new deck in place. And once we have the sections tied together and the pavement on, we'll have the road reopened by probably early October.
Okay, and of course, we're all very anxious people, and we like things to get done fast, but of course you want the quality to be there as well. So you were able to complete this accelerated project with overtime, working weekends, is that right? How did you sort of clump? I mean, it's a very important project, a bridge. You don't want that to be done poorly. So how do you do this, very well in such a short period of time?
One of the targets of the program was to focus on delivery, both on time and on budget, and reducing the impacts to the driving public. And that's why on these accelerated bridge projects, like the one in East Hampton, we've employed these different methods. One is, of course, the prefabricated sections. The other one is we're offering actual financial incentives to our contractors to finish early. It makes more money for them if they finish early. And what we've seen is we've seen a real positive return for that. We now see this particular contractor is working 10-hour days, 5 days a week, and they're working 8 hours on Saturday to compress this schedule and get this done because they're really anxious to get this financial incentive. We have used it in other areas of the state. In almost every case, the contractors have earned the full incentive, which is good for us because they're getting the jobs done in a timely way, efficiently, and getting it done quicker, lessening the impacts to the drivers and any abutting businesses along the way.
Sounds like a win-win for everyone, that's for sure.
It's working really well. We like it. We're going to use it more and more.
Very good. Frank DiPola, thank you so much for coming on and joining us, talking to us about the tolls and, of course, these other important projects happening in Western Mass. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next, we're going to talk to some of our state lawmakers about upcoming projects and new legislation, so stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We just spent the first part of our program talking to an administrator at Mass DOT about upcoming transportation projects in our state, as well as how our money will be spent once tolls are reinstated on the Mass Pike. These are all major developments, but not the only thing happening, of course. Our state legislature's formal session ended earlier this month, and here to talk to us about what's been done and what is tabled until next session, we have a senator and House member with us. We have Senator Jim Welch here to talk to us, and we have State Representative Brian Ash. Thank you both so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
First, coming off of what we were just hearing from Mass DOT about the tolls and all that, I know that this transportation package was not an easy pass, very controversial, kind of linked to the budget as well. Talk to us about what was sort of going on during that whole process, what you wanted out, what you thought was important to keep in. How did that really work from Beacon Hill?
I think it started with the governor's package, and the governor had an extremely aggressive package with, I think it was a 19-cent gallon gas tax as well as some other things. And even though that would have taken care of many of our needs, I think most legislators realized it was a little too aggressive and it probably wouldn't have been palatable back in the districts. And the House came up with a lower, but still a tax in there with gas and some other things. And then their compromise, you know, that the Senate as well, and after all parties met, there was a compromise, and the governor had a veto, and then the House voted and the Senate voted. So it ended up being a compromise of everything going into there, what, you know, the best for most.
Okay. Have to ask you, how are we financially on the state level? Because, you know, we have the gas tax included in, as you said, cost of cigarettes, and of course the tolls going back in. Of course, we just heard those tolls are very specific to road projects. But when you hear of these taxes going up, but then we did have a sales tax holiday. So it kind of makes you wonder, are we really in desperate need? What is happening right now that we needed the taxes to go up for these?
Well, I'd say, you know, our financial position here in Massachusetts is fair, hopefully continuing to get better. We have seen some, you know, consecutive months of positive revenues, according to adjusted revenues. But we're still not in a place where we were several years ago, you know, prior to the recession, prior to 2005 or 2006. So we do have a ways to go in terms of the economy coming back, in terms of putting, you know, money back into our revenue accounts. You know, the reality is we're in better position probably than other states across the country in Massachusetts economically with revenues, but we do have a long way to go.
As far as the sales tax holiday, that really doesn't benefit this state. It's more of a feel-good for the consumer and the stores, and it helps generate getting people back out there shopping, feeling comfortable about making purchases, and that's something that we've been committed to for a while. And the consumers as well as the merchants really seem to like it. So.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago they didn't have it though, and I thought it was because we just couldn't afford it for that 1 year.
We do lose money, but as Jim said, our economy is, you know, it's still better than most, but you know, we need to continue moving in a positive direction.
Right, and it's in the sales tax holiday is a real you know, positive thing amongst, you know, people who live in our districts and people who live in not only, you know, every corner of Massachusetts, and it's something that they look forward to every year. We try and keep the suspense going whether or not we're going to have it every year, because we don't necessarily want people to plan on it and hold off on purchases, but at the same time it is something that people have gotten relatively used to, and if it's something that we can do, we try and do it.
Was the gas tax difficult to come to an agreement on? Because of course we know that people in Connecticut love to come up to Massachusetts for our gas. It's kind of what we're, you know, known for, at least in this area. We have cheaper gas than some of the surrounding states, you know, and then we're kind of going back on that a little bit by raising the cost. Is that something that, or maybe it doesn't matter?
I know, I think it was I voted against it, the whole package, because I was afraid of the tax, that people didn't have a palate for it yet. However, that being said, there are so many needs, as was discussed earlier, with our transportation projects out here in the western part of the state as well as the rest of the state. So there isn't enough revenue to take care of everything that we really need to, and unfortunately that, you know, one of the evils that had to be done.
And do you have any concern? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, you know, you try and find that balance,
yeah,
obviously, and try and meet the need where we do have so many transportation. We're an old state. I mean, we're one of the first states, obviously, in the country, and our infrastructure is older and decaying and aging, and we have to keep up with those needs. And the governor came out, obviously, with his transportation proposal that you know, wanted to increase close to $2 billion in taxes, and we in the House and the Senate didn't feel comfortable, you know, going that far, but we did settle somewhere around somewhere between $500 and $800 million of investment in transportation, with about $500 million in new tax revenue. 3 cents on a gallon, of course, being the gasoline tax, $1 on a pack of cigarettes, and you know, other taxes around computer software. But you know, when you do try and meet the needs of a large you know, a large infrastructure here in Massachusetts, and a very complicated one in some respects, you do have to have the revenue to meet that. So.
Yeah, because it did almost see like, you know, it's like drivers took a little bit of hit with this, between the tolls and the gas as well. That's all transportation. Do you expect this to end up the way you expected, you know, or do you think people will, you know, some of their driving patterns will change due to this, or do you think it just won't be that big of an impact after all, with the tolls and all that included?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, the tolls between exits 1 through 6, you know, people here in Western Massachusetts especially are concerned or have raised concern that those are being reinstituted. But, you know, looking back, I mean, the tolls haven't been here on exits 1 through 6 since 1996. Although it's hard for us to kind of come to grips with the fact that we're putting, you know, the tolls are going to be put back on. you know, and the commissioner said it in the earlier segment, that money is going to stay here in Western Massachusetts and be directed towards projects here in Western Massachusetts to keep up with our infrastructure. So that was one of the important things for me, you know, to make sure that money that was going to be collected on those tolls is going to be reinvested back into the area.
And how about the second part of this, the high-speed tolls that we're considering? Of course, it's always nice to see Massachusetts move forward and upgrade and, you know, find more efficient ways. But then you hear about the hundreds of people that could lose their jobs as well.
Yes, but on the other side of that, there'll be well more than that construction jobs, you know, to update the Mass Pike and turn over. But and having the Mass Pike flow more freely, I think that's a win-win for everybody in the state, whether it's for vacations or whether going to work. I mean, the Mass Pike can get pretty cumbersome at times, depending the time of the day, time of the year. So it would be nice to free it up so people could travel easier. And in the long run, hopefully that helps with their work conditions, whether vacations or any other traveling.
And certainly the main artery in our state.
Right.
Yeah, and you do hope that it's an investment. You hope it's an investment in transportation needs that's going to lead to better economic opportunities for people in every area of the state. And you know, we talked about I know you talked about the I-91 viaduct, and that's another example of trying to make sure that our infrastructure keeps up with the growing demand that we have here in Western Mass and throughout the state.
And do you all have concerns about that viaduct as well? You know, we hear it in different, you know, some people think it's, you know, the absolute most important thing we need to be looking at, others not so much. We're not really privy to the details of this project, but I mean, is that something that you feel we are going to see soon?
Well, I think I'm concerned, as I'm sure Senator Welch, anytime we do construction like that, it slows down the roadways, and you know, Route 91 isn't built for excess traffic in certain areas. So I mean, it's always a concern whether it's a casino coming, whether it's new traffic, or whether it's Mass Pike, of slowing traffic down. But it's something you have to do, and you can't, the longer you put it off, the more difficult it'll be.
Right. I think there's question about how far along it really is, though. As far, I drive that stretch every morning, and I know I see people patching up, you know, and you want to know that you're driving on safe road. I mean, is this?
Well, I think public safety is probably the #1 priority. If it wasn't safe to travel on, you know, the Department of Transportation would certainly not allow passenger cars or any vehicles to travel on it. I think what the viaduct gets so much attention because of the price tag that's attached to it, and because of the nature of the project. It's up in the air, and it needs to be replaced, and it has, you know, big columns that need to be replaced. So I think the dramatics almost around the project is really what draws so much attention to it. But it is something that needs to be done in the relatively near future. And you know, for us in Western Mass, when we do you know, see that project underway, we'll know that our money that's being, you know, hopefully that's being collected through increased tax revenues, not necessarily tolls because that stay with the turnpike, but increased revenues will be going to infrastructure projects in our area.
Okay, yeah, that is a scary project actually, especially the way you talk about it there. You're absolutely right. But there is a lot more going on besides these transportation projects. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll continue this conversation and talk about some other legislation that's coming up. So stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We're continuing our conversation now with State Senator Jim Welch and State Representative Brian Ash. Thank you again for joining us. We spent a lot of this program talking about the transportation projects. We had someone on earlier to talk about the Mass Pike tolls, but of course we have more happening. The legislative session ended, and I know that there's a lot more coming up in the next session. Representative Harold Naughton has actually been going around the state conducting these different meetings about gun control. This is something that is always controversial, but it's something we continue to talk about in the different states. I want to find out where you think we're headed here in our state when it comes to that.
Well, I mean, the first comment, you know, that typically comes up when we do talk about gun control in Massachusetts is that Massachusetts has very strict gun laws on the books currently. Obviously, you know, there are people on both sides of the discussion. Some people that don't want to reduce those laws, you know, for one, and then two, people that want to increase them, or people that say that you know, the laws that are currently on the book should be enforced. I think most people, and you know, people when you look at it from a common sense standpoint, say that, you know, the issue we want to get at are, one, illegal guns, and two, make sure that anybody who owns a gun is you know, healthy enough to be able to own that gun. And I think that those are the two questions that arise, and moving forward, I think we're going to come up with ways to potentially address that without trying to encumber and try and stand in the way of anybody's right to bear arms.
And the hearings, I was going to say, Senator Welch and myself both serve on the Public Safety Homeland Security Committee with Representative Naughton. And what I thought was great, setting up the hearings, 5 of them across the state, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction to tragedy like it was in Connecticut, we wanted to listen to people across the state. The hearing we did in Springfield, there was probably over 500 people there, and they had some legitimate concerns. And I think that's the best response. It's not to just quickly make a law to, for appearance sake, but to do something, if we have to do anything at all, to do something that really makes a difference. As Senator Welch mentioned, we already have some of the strictest gun laws in the country. So maybe the laws don't need to be changed. Maybe how we protect our, not only our gun owners, but protect the rest of the citizens.
And a very positive thing I think that came out from the Springfield hearing that we had was there were people on both sides of the issue. And obviously Springfield is the home to Smith & Wesson, which is a very large manufacturer of firearms and a very large employer here in Western Massachusetts. And but there were people that were there at the hearing to speak on both sides of the issue. And no matter who spoke, what their issue was, they received a very kind applause from everybody in the audience. So I thought out here, especially in Western Mass, the debate was very mature, and it was something that was a very positive thing. To see that there's issues. I mean, there's beliefs on both sides of the issue, but we can have an adult conversation about it, and maybe we can work towards finding a solution to it that'll satisfy most everybody.
So do you see this being something that's spoken about in this next session, or?
I'd say there's a good possibility of that. I think there's one more hearing to go, and then putting all that information together, see if the responses are unilateral across the state, or if there's different parts of the state have different viewpoints. But I think what Senator Welch mentioned too, I was amazed and pleasantly surprised talking with people after the hearing in Springfield that people on both sides felt like they had a different opinion of the other side after that. They understood certain aspects of why either somebody wanted more gun control or why somebody thought it was too strict already. And hopefully after all that we can come to some common ground if it makes sense to do anything.
Well, that's good to hear that there is that kind of reception there, that's for sure. How about welfare reform? This is a big issue in our state, and we've seen positions changed based on the performance of the certain DTA office. So what are you thinking about welfare reform? Is this something that's spoken about? How far did you get on that last year even?
Well, Senate President Murray came out and identified welfare reform as one of her top 3 priorities in this legislative session, and we in the Senate took up a comprehensive welfare reform package where we did some good things, tightening up the system all around, especially focusing on fraud. Absolutely. And putting additional resources into investigating fraud and making sure that the system hopefully is operating the way it should be, and only those people that truly need assistance, public assistance, are the ones that are receiving it. That welfare reform package will go to the Senate. Go to the House from the Senate, hopefully upcoming maybe in the fall or the winter, and we'll have a final package that we can vote on, because I think it's important to address the entire welfare system, not just bits and pieces. Right. Although we did do some important things in the budget led by the House, was making sure, and I'll let Representative Ash talk about that, the photo IDs on the EBT cards, which was very important. I'll turn it over to him.
Well, originally last year we started with the EBT reform, which was a big move in the right direction, just making sure that the restrictions were in place on the EBT cards, so people are using them for the right reason. And to follow up with that, the House has a commitment for welfare reform as well. We want to make sure that the people that are using welfare, that need welfare, it's a way to move forward. It's not a way of life. It's not something you just get and keep forever. And I think some of the restrictions on there now to prove you have a job, and if you can't prove it, or if you're found lying, you could have perjury charges, as well as giving them the tools they need to get a job, to get training for a job, to make sure they're going forward, not just stagnant. And I think that's a burden for not only the general public, the taxpayers, but that's not even fair for the person. We should be, giving them incentive to try to get a job, to try to move forward. You don't want to pay somebody enough where they lose the incentive to do anything.
Sure.
And I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, to piggyback on that statement, I think people at home would be, if they were to look at kind of the details in the welfare reform package and understand, just as Representative Ash said, right now there's a 60-day waiting period. You apply for benefits and you have 60 days before you have to start looking for employment. In the welfare reform package, we changed that. You have to start looking for a job before you can apply and receive benefits. So those are important changes that we are tightening up eligibility requirements, tightening up any type of areas where people are granted exceptions. So we are working hard towards a goal to tighten up the whole system.
And I think one of the things in the Senate package that's just good too, it's trying to take out of the paper age into the digital age. So make sure that all the records are up to date, so people aren't looking through files and maybe missing something. They can catch it a lot earlier to streamline the process with welfare. Make sure that money isn't being wasted and it's there for a reason. We're doing it right.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, and to also speak about, oftentimes, that's one thing we as legislators hear a lot about from our constituents is, why is there so much fraud in welfare? Well, we're trying to invest in the abuse and the fraud side of things and make sure that the enforcement is there and the investigation is there. We're also going to make it easier for people to call the welfare fraud hotline to make sure that if they do see any type of abuse, that they can report it themselves. So not that we want people out there being too vigilante, but at the same time, the public can take part and say that we know a certain piece of fraud is happening.
Right, empowers the public.
It's interesting that you say that, because as a news station, we actually do get a lot of reports in that people are having a hard time reporting, that sort of thing. So it's interesting that you touch on that. Very good conversation, and we are going to continue this. We're going to take a short break after this, so stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We are continuing our conversation now with State Senator Jim Welch and State Representative Brian Ash. Thank you so much for joining us, talking about a few other issues here. We started off the program talking about transportation, but talking about a few other things that we have tabled until next legislative session that we can expect to see. One thing that's moving forward in our state is medical marijuana. We're seeing many applications come in for people who are interested in putting up dispensaries and all that. How does the state plan on handling this process? I know that this is brand new to us, so how do we do this?
Very deliberately and relatively cautiously and slow, because we've obviously never entered into this industry before. It is something that we take very seriously. The voters approved it by an overwhelming margin last fall. The law took effect in January, but I think in terms of setting up the infrastructure and the guidelines and exactly how the licenses will be I guess approved or handed out is something that's going to happen relatively slowly and cautiously, and I think the DPH is taking their time to make sure that they're going to do it as best as they possibly can and as safe as they possibly can.
I think right now they're in the process of taking applications for dispensaries. I think it was up to 35 across the Commonwealth, but as Jim mentioned, they're taking it very slow, because this is a huge step. I think it's a positive step, because I think any drug that can be used to help people, whether it's cancer, AIDS, whatever they might have, if it can help in their recovery or to lessen pain, we should be looking at that. But we also don't want to open Pandora's box. We want to make sure that the dispensaries are run properly, that people aren't abusing the system. I think, like any system we set up, the biggest problem is making sure that it's run efficiently and there are no loopholes in there that we're missing. So be safe is probably the best. Safe and cautious along the line is the best way to do it.
Looks like the law literally still needs to be drawn out so that these are placed appropriately. I know that some communities have put moratoriums on their own. They don't want to move forward until they see. So that's something that we'll see.
And I think because there's so few states with it, I think people are watching other states, their mistakes as well as their successes, and see what they're doing there. There's also online, you can go on the state website, and there's questions for somebody, whether it's somebody that is sick and is looking, what do I need to do, what kind of registration card, or somebody looking for a dispensary if they want to open it. There's kind of some Q&A, some frequently asked questions that people can go on and kind of get themselves up to speed.
Interesting. Well, it's good, and we're hoping Massachusetts makes as few mistakes as possible.
Absolutely.
I'm sure other states have made some we'd like to not repeat. I want to kind of just talk about a little bit of politics here. We've had some shifting on Beacon Hill. Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray left. Senator Michael Knappich, who's been in office for a number of years, really rallied for Western Mass, decided to leave and take a job at Westfield. So just your thoughts on some of the shifting that's happening there and how you think that may or may not impact us in the western part of the state.
Sure. I mean, I certainly comment on my good friend and colleague, Senator Mike Knappich, who left us in the Senate just a couple weeks ago, or less than a couple weeks ago, and that will leave a void. Senator Knappich was probably one of the most respected members of the legislature, being a Republican in a very heavily dominated Democratic legislature, but he was somebody that was respected on both sides of the aisle, that you could work with, and that worked so hard to benefit you know, all of Western Massachusetts, whether it was Westfield State College or whether it was the Holyoke Soldiers Home or just Western Mass in general. He'll certainly be missed, and his advocacy will be missed.
Absolutely. I mean, our state's loss is Westfield State University's gain. You know, unfortunately, the change is necessary from time to time. I think that's great for Senator Knappich to move on. He was doing this quite a long time, and I'm sure he's going to contribute to the higher education as well now. But it's good to every now and then get some new blood, give people an opportunity to get involved in politics. And every time somebody from a position up here moves, there's the ripple effect. You know, whoever gets his seat, if it's another politician, there's movement there. It could help local politics. And the same with Lieutenant Governor Murray. I think he did a great job for the Commonwealth. Again, an extremely likable man and strong advocate for Western Mass, is out here quite frequently. That will leave a void as well. But I think Commonwealth has plenty of qualified individuals from the top level to selectmen. You know, a lot of people given the opportunity can do great things in the Commonwealth.
Did the lieutenant leave you with any concerns about what could happen? I mean, Governor Patrick has already said that he's not planning to run the next session next year. Do you have any concerns about the stability of our government right now, or are you thinking that this is just, you know, two people and it's okay, and we have what it takes to continue?
Well, there is a system in place. If you know, Governor Patrick were to leave office for whatever reason, which he said he's not planning on doing, and I think we have to take him at his word to do that, that he won't. If that were to happen, the Secretary of the State, Bill Galvin, would then become governor. So there is a system in place, and you know, oftentimes when the governor does leave the state or travels for whatever type of business or whatever type of trade mission, you know, the Secretary of State takes over the duties of the governor for that period of time. So there is a system in place, but as Representative Ashe mentioned, the big thing is Lieutenant Governor Murray was a very strong advocate for Western Mass and spent a lot of time out here working with us and trying to move our agenda forward. So we appreciate his hard work and wish him well in his new job, but we'll leave a little bit of a void, that's for sure.
And there's always a concern who's going to get new positions, how well would they work with the House, with the Senate, with, you know, with the Commonwealth, with Western Mass, as well as local areas. But our system's set up that the individuals, it doesn't matter who's in there, the system will continue to work the way it always has. It just might have a different personality, whether it's a governor, lieutenant governor, senator, rep, city councilor, mayor. So our system is functioning just like a well-oiled machine. It will continue to move along. You just might always not like the parts.
There you go. That's a great way to end the program, actually. We're going to end it right there. Thank you both so much for joining us, Senator Jim Welch, Representative Brian Ashe. We do look forward to the new legislation ahead and what we come out with this year. So thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about what you're working on. And we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. There are big changes coming to Western Mass soon. One obvious change is on the Massachusetts Turnpike. Tolls will be reinstated here in the western part of the state in October. Lawmakers are also getting ready for the next legislative session. It's what we've been talking about for the last hour with a representative from Mass DOT and 2 state lawmakers. And that is our program for today. We want to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you at home for watching. And if you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.